Welcome to this episode of the Lawrence University Podcast. I'm Rich Marshall, and today I'm joined by Michael Licht.
Hello, all. Well, happy to be here.
As a trained architect, Michael pursued his passion for video game design, working the past 20 years for AAA studios, including LucasArts, Electronic Arts, Heavy Iron, and consultant with Disney titles and Survious. He has shipped 9 AAA titles and multiple VR experiences. Areas of expertise in game design include gameplay systems, AI, UX, UI, combat, and level design. Today, we are going to dive into Michael's career in the gaming industry. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Thrilled to be here.
Let's start with your connection to Lawrence University.
Yeah, my son is actually a sophomore at Lawrence. He's studying physics over there. So I'm happy to be a part of it. I saw a couple months back on your Facebook page that you had a couple courses in game design, and it was a great excuse for me to get out there and see my son some more and to volunteer some time in the program. So I came out and did a few talks and had a great time and got to be with my son.
And great to have your son here at Lawrence. I love that connection. Let's dive in more with those classes. I know you're involved with Angela Vanden Elzen's Introduction to Game Studies class.
Yes.
Can you dive more into that role and how you're supporting the students here at Lawrence?
Yeah, I met Angela through the Facebook page. I just texted her directly through Facebook, and we started talking, and she showed me some of her curriculum for the class. I actually taught a semester at USC between Heavy Iron and starting my own company. So I had a lot of material that I was ready to go. So we got to talking, and I thought I would do a talk specifically about level design, which as an architect and also as I worked on the majority of the titles that I worked on, I was a level designer. Most people don't, I don't think it really gets the attention it deserves academically. So it was a great opportunity for me to talk about a very specific discipline of video game design called level design. And I did a 2-day sort of workshop thing in her class.
And I actually got to see part of that. It was quite impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you again for all that work with students. Let's, certainly talk about your path. Well-respected, impressive career that you've had.
Thank you.
How did you first get into the gaming industry? And what inspired you to pursue this career?
That's great. Yeah, I actually, so I'm a trained architect, and I actually have my master's degree in architecture from Virginia Tech. And I was lucky to graduate my last few years when I discovered LucasArts and video games. And I've always known about video games, but LucasArts started doing some really fun games at that time. And I started learning some 3D tools to make video games. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I really, really like this. I like architecture a lot, but I found out that I really like video games. And so when I graduated in '96, I got a job in San Francisco at a very large architecture firm as a junior architect, and couldn't shake it. Really, really wanted to do some video games. And so I'd read in a video game magazine article about how LucasArts hired Berkeley Architecture School graduates to help design their worlds. And I thought, oh, I got to get in on this. I sent them a bunch of material, eventually sending them my architectural graduate thesis. And they were like, well, just an architect wants to work with us. So I think that was interesting enough that they brought me in, and I did a few days of testing with them. And and I got the position as a level designer, which at the time I didn't even know what that role was. So it was a very exciting time.
And I learned a bit about that with your class presentation. Can you elaborate a bit of what level design is?
Sure. I mean, there's an old saying, level design is where the rubber hits the road. A level designer is his or hers or their job is to take basically everyone's work and put it together in a way that's fun to play. The engineers make all the game mechanics, and the engineers make the AI, and there's system designers to design the gameplay mechanics, and there's AI designers, and all these people work together. But without a level designer, all you've got is a lot of really cool code. You don't have a game. And the level designer's job is to take it all and go, okay, I'm level 1 through 4, you're level 6 through 8, or whatever it is. And here's your outline of what your level is supposed to be about. The hero does this and the hero does that, but we don't know really what happens in between. So come up with all those cool things that are going to happen, and make sure you get the gravity boots in there, and you introduce these new enemies and these new allies, and do it in an arc way that's the player's starting, and there's like a mid, and there's like a good finale to it. And then we'll go into the next one. When you play a game, you play I played level 1 through 5, or I played level so and so. That's the level designer.
You just don't realize,
Yeah,
the
there's
steps and the detail behind the scenes that goes into that.
yeah, it's a really cool job. I enjoy it very much. I
Mhm.
always have.
Let's talk a bit about your educational background. I know you
Sure.
mentioned architecture. What educational background skills were most valuable for you as you really built and developed your career with design?
So architectural school is a really great experience. It really is, yes, you're designing buildings, but really is the study of design, and how to like learning a design process. And there isn't just one design processes can adapt for all sorts of end products that you're trying to do. And in architecture, I designed, a whole lot of buildings in school. And when I started talking to LucasArts and started to understand what this role of level design was, it seemed exactly like architecture school. Like, oh, there's a person that has to go somewhere and do something, and in this environment that has to meet certain requirements. Like, oh, this is just like architecture, except now I'm designing the interior of the Death Star, right? And so it was just a big open floodgate of creativity for me. Getting from nothing to an end
Mhm.
product is a very difficult process, and that's basically what I learned in architecture school.
What about skills? What skills would you credit to your success?
I mean, I had to learn design methodology. I had to learn how to be an active listener. I had to learn how to understand my requirements, set my ego aside, and do work within the boundaries that I have that the design director has given me. I needed to learn how to present, which is very important. I need to learn how to take feedback and iterate. Again, putting the ego aside, I had to learn how to, take that rough initial idea and iterate on it in a way that is heading in the right direction, right, and doesn't sort of blow the rest of the game. As far as like hard skills, like every single level designer, everybody in the industry has, the industry is focused around tools. So it is extremely important that you learn the tools, but it's more important that you learn how to think and on their between time while you're learning and theorizing and writing your papers and doing your studies, the tools are always growing and changing. So you just have to keep up with it. But don't get me wrong, if you don't know your tools, you're not going to get a job, right?
Mhm.
It's crucial, important, but you're definitely not going to get a job if you don't think like a designer,
Mhm.
right? So once you get that part done and you can implement, you're ready to hit the ground running.
I imagine learning is never ending.
It's never
And
ending.
of
Yeah.
technology and the
Yeah.
tools that you have available to you, and how much has progressed over time. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, the limitations. My first game was on a PlayStation 1. I don't think I have it here. My first game was on a PlayStation 1 called Jedi Power Battles, and the tools were extremely rudimentary. The PlayStation 1, my phone is probably 100 times more powerful than the PlayStation 1 was. And anybody who's worked in games or worked in a real-time 3D environment understands there are multiple limitations to what you can show on the screen at a time. And back then, you were lucky if you could show, I think, 5,000 polygons per view and like 10 textures. It had to be very small, and limitations are millions now, but it's still, if you don't understand those limitations, you're gonna screw everything, screw everything up.
Which really dives into the next topic, which is
Sure.
how your role has evolved over time.
Yeah, I
Well,
sure, sure. So I started as a level designer, and the majority of my career was as a level designer. I would say like the first, and it's interesting too, because level design, like no two video games are really the same. Yes, you can make a bunch of FPSs, but they're never really the same. And hopefully they grow and change. So the requirements and the learning that has to go with each one is a constant growing experience. So my first game, it was a side-scrolling run, jump, shoot kind of experience, Jedi Power Battles. And then my second game was a flying game called Battle for Naboo on the N64. And I had to learn about designing a level for flying. There's no boundaries and you're flying around. There's other enemies flying around and how do you control them? And then I worked on another game called Galactic Battlegrounds, which was an RTS game. And on that one, I used my architecture background. So I guess what I'm saying is like every project was somewhat different. Some were drastically different, and some were not so drastic, but different. On Galactic Battlegrounds, I had to design, if anyone ever played Age of Empire, it was the kind of thing where you build a structure and you evolve that structure, and an opponent is building somewhere else on the map, and they're building their structures and building their bases, and then you go to conflict. And we had done that with Star Wars. And it was my job as an architect to say, well, if the Empire was going to build a tank base or a barrack or a boat ramp or something, or a boat dock, what would it look like? What is the Empire architecture? And it's like these rigid lines. It's no nonsense. It's kind of like brutalism, but with steel, and I had to define all these levels. Anyway, that was a whole other interesting conversation to talk about architecture for that game. So later in my career, I at EA, I became a lead LD, one of three lead LDs technically on Medal of Honor Pacific Assault, and then one of three LDs again on Medal of Honor Airborne. So I got to do more of a leadership role at that point, where it was just me and a small team in total. I think we had 15 people, two other designers, a couple of artists, a couple of engineers, and I was responsible for making sure 3 levels got made in the game that had, I think, 9 levels in total, 9 or 12, I forget it in total. And then I think the most drastic change then would have been the couple years later, just these past few years. I had never done AI design before, and they needed help with that, and I was like, I would love to learn how to do that. So a couple YouTube videos later, and I was hitting the ground running, as well as weapon design, weapon mechanics, tools for the MPs, for the player, even tools for authoring the gameplay, like how the designer gets in the tools and how they make the aliens come out of what duct and how we get them to run around the walls and how the designer authors all that. I had to come up with the systems for how I felt I could author it, and hopefully the engineer can go, oh, I see what he's trying to do. I can make it work like that, so he can control when the enemies come in and where they go and all that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the high level.
Yeah, an impressive career.
Sorry, it was a lot of stuff there.
Oh, no, not at all. You had a lot of incredible titles that you mentioned as well. So once you have a spot here, which one did you enjoy the most?
I was a huge fan of Medal of Honor, especially Medal of Honor Pacific Assault was really great. I went to EA because they worked on Medal of Honor Allied. They made a Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and it was the first truly cinematic game that I'd ever played. If anybody who played the first Allied Assault back in the day, and this is most of your viewers are probably kids, they don't remember it, but it was the first time I ever stormed Normandy virtually, and it was an amazing experience. And when I heard they were making a Pacific Assault, the Pacific Theater, what's going on, in the islands with Japan, it's like, oh, please, I would love to be involved in that. So the research involved was amazing. We went to New Orleans, interviewed a bunch of veterans at the New Orleans Museum. It was originally called the D-Day Museum. I think it's now called the World War II Museum in New Orleans. I got to interview a bunch of people, got to see a bunch of, artifacts, and it was read a bunch of stories online as well. And I got to recreate, I took pride in trying to recreate things that was based on stories that I'd heard. So when you play the first opening of Pacific Assault, where there's this boat ride, and we're in Pearl Harbor, and these Japanese planes are bombing all of our ships. When we get up to the West Virginia, and it's listing, and it had settled on the ground, and there was a story about how somebody went into the base, an officer went into the base of the ship and reflooded half the ship so it wouldn't tip over, and they could keep fighting. Like, that's a great mission. And I was like, I want to do that. And so if you'll notice when you play the game, you go into the side of the ship, and somebody yells, "We're sinking! You gotta flood the other side!" And the player has to run through an exploding ship and turn all these valves. There was no shooting at all, right? It was just trying not to drown and trying not to get hit by steam and all that while you're turning all these valves, and this ship like recants over. It was really cool. It was one of my favorite experiences.
Sounds that way. So I also saw with your background, you've been an adjunct professor, and mentioned your consulting in the bio as well. Could you share more about that?
Yeah. In 2008, at that time, I'd been in the industry since 99, so it was close to 10 years of working 60-hour weeks between EA and LucasArts, and I was very fried. So I wanted to take a little time to myself. My firstborn son was there. I had a little money in the bank. I had some room to breathe. And so I decided to take a little time off and figure out what my next steps were. And I had decided I wanted to start a level design company. And so I started calling around and contacting these different studios. And I thought, well, there's these studios in Japan and in China, like at foreign studios and locally, that were trying to go from just being asset creators to actually being developers. Like oftentimes we would outsource. Like I met a lot of these companies through outsourcing when I was at EA. And I was like, do you guys want to make a game as well? And I could help you as a designer. And so I contacted Virtuous. And as I'm talking to them, I'm realizing we're having two different conversations. I thought I was interviewing them about hiring me to be a level design, like as a level design team. And they thought I was talking to them because I knew that they were making a Medal of Honor game under the hood and no one else knew about it, which they were. And we finally realized we're talking about two different things. And I was like, you guys are making Medal of Honor? He's like, yeah, isn't that what you're calling us? And I was like, I didn't know you were making a Medal of Honor. And they're like, we would love to hire you to teach our kids how to design Medal of Honor levels. And I was like, I could put together a workshop and spend like 2 weeks out there. So I did. I wrote this whole like how to design a Medal of Honor level. I wrote this whole presentation. I went out there and met with all these young Shanghainese kids, and it was just a wonderful experience. And I was like, I think I might like this teaching thing. So I started doing a lot more of that. I consulted on multiple titles of various other companies. And then in the process, my name got tossed in the ring at USC. Someone was teaching a level design class at Viterbi, their engineering school, which is not part of the cinema school. And this person couldn't teach for one semester, I think is how it went. And my name got tossed in there, and somebody called me and said, can you do, like, you want to teach a level design class just one semester? And I was like, yeah, I got all the material ready. Let's do it. So I was an adjunct at USC just for one semester. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot longer, obviously, than just a 2-week seminar. Yeah, and I had a great experience doing that. And I'm thinking that's probably my next steps anyway now. My hair is gray enough now where it's probably time to get back, you know?
You did an incredible job with the
Thanks.
class, with all that as well. So let's talk about technical skills. How
Yeah.
important are technical skills like coding
Right.
for aspiring game designers? And are there specific areas to focus on with their learning?
Yeah. So in architecture school, I'll make this analogy. In architecture school, I had to study engineering physics, like applied physics. I had to be able to take a beam, know what the material is, find out where the loads are and where it's fixed. And I had to do these ridiculous formulas to try to figure out how it would deflect. I'm not allowed to do that as an architect, right? But we had to go through multiple physics classes. So we didn't do stupid stuff. So at least we were close. You know what I mean? And the engineers didn't come back and go, you can't have 75-foot cantilevers over the ocean with only one beam. You're ridiculous. That's my analogy, the closest analogy I can make towards a designer learning to code. It's important that you understand a certain amount. It's really more important that you understand, but as far as like Visual Studio, not so much. But it is important to understand scripting. Every design tool has a scripting language, and scripting languages were designed as a pseudo programming language for designers, typically to prototype, for quick iteration prototype, and to implement gameplay mechanics. But they were always very high level, and they shouldn't let you get into too much trouble. Coding wise, scripting is very important. And it's good to know a thing or two about programming, but even with Unity, like it's all C#, you can get into a lot of trouble. Keep it high level. That covers coding. So that brings me to the tools then. As a designer, and there are a lot of different designers. So as a system designer and as a technical designer and there's like 3 different levels these days. There's multiple levels, but it depends on how big the studio is. But you could have a system designer that doesn't do technical stuff, and that's probably a good thing. So they just like ask for stuff that may be over the top, but hopefully not crazy. Hopefully they know enough not to do something ridiculous. And then you have a technical designer who basically he's the guy, or he or she or they are the guy that throws it through a spreadsheet, kind of comes up with the numbers, throws it into the Unreal or Unity or whatever the tool is, Crytek, scripts it out, kind of okay scripting to make it happen, and prototypes. Every studio that I've worked for, I've always prototyped my own gameplay mechanics in the scripting tool. And the more you know, the more valuable you are, because you can go to an engineer and go, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for, and you can actually play it, right? Rather than giving them just a document. But there's a double-edged sword, because you do not want that code getting shipped. You know what I mean? Make sure like he looks at it and goes, yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah, there's no way we're shipping the way you've written this, but I can make it better and efficient, and I'm going to do it in Visual Studio and C++, and I'm not going to do it in Java or whatever the surface level scripting language is. Coding wise, that's a lot of the value. And the rest is, if you can't hit the ground running, it's great to study theory, and it's great to study, everybody wants to know how Will Wright came up with The Sims, right? And we want to study Molyneux, we want to study all the great game designers, and you want to be able to put together a great pitch and all these sort of things. But the reality is, in an industry, they're funny about you being able to actually work. I don't know why. You go in, and if you can't actually like make something, that was my attempt at sarcasm, but if you can't actually use the tools and make something, they're like, yeah, you sound really smart, but we got a game to make, and we need someone who understands Unreal and who can hit the ground running. And I know you want to be the design director because you know all this theory, but we have a level design role. It's open. Can you get into Unreal right now and help us make the next 6 levels? Well, I can maybe learn Unreal. Thanks for talking to us. So it is very, very important to know how to hit the ground running and know the tools.
What advice would you give to individuals that are interested in getting into gaming?
So it's a little scary right now in the industry. There were a lot of layoffs at Activision. There were a lot of layoffs at Microsoft. There were a lot of layoffs at EA in the beginning of the year. And there's a lot of people looking for work. There are also a lot of people, such as myself, and now I've stepped down now, who have been in the industry for 10 plus years, who are holding on to their jobs like a dog with a bone. What I'm saying is it's hard to just quote get a job. It's a very desirable industry. Everybody wants to get in. Everybody wants to be a rock star, right? Everyone wants to be the famous artist. And there's for every Eddie Van Halen, there's unlimited number of guitarists who are fantastic, who never really broke through. The challenging part there, and the part where I think we need to start rethinking things, is about the idea of getting a job. You can be in the industry right now. I have seen amazing indie games get picked up and published, and companies go wide and get funded on the smallest, most simple indies, right? I mean, Rocket League, for example, I saw that it indicated, I don't know, 2013 or something. It was a while ago. Soccer with cars, I don't know, it sounds like fun, but it sounds like a one-off deal. I don't know how this is going to grow. And it did, right? I mean, it was the same story with, I have a whole list. There's just, if you go and look online, like look at all list of companies that started with just a couple of kids going, yeah, I'm not going to get a job. There's just too many people. So me and my buddies are going to get together and make a little prototype demo. You can make them for cheap. I mean, the tools are out there. Unreal has a marketplace full of example code, full of example art, full of characters, full of animations. There's no reason a student or a couple students, hopefully a couple of students, can't get together as their graduate thesis while they're in school, make a little game and shove it up on Steam and see what happens. That is how so many little companies that have blown up and got funded, and people, like, at minimum, it's going to help you get in the door if you really want to get a job. So you want to be in the industry? Be in it. Don't expect a big savior, Activision, Microsoft, or EA, or whatever, to save you. Let's talk about life in the industry at those kinds of companies as well. I think I mentioned earlier that after EA, I had to take a break from 60-hour weeks. It is a busy industry, and it is an abusive industry. Some companies have gotten better at this. Most still hide and expect much more from their employees. Rockstar, I hate to call names, but I mean, there's some companies out there that really exploit their people, and really, they should not be working the kind of hours that they're working. It is a hard life. Epic has gotten much better. There are certain studios out there that have finally said, you know what? There's no reason we can't ship our game a year later. It doesn't have to be in 16 months or 2 years. Maybe we'll go for 5, and we'll ship some things in between, or we'll alternate our schedule. So we're always shipping something like every 2 years or something like that. But we don't kill our people. If you can find a company like that, like for example, Epic, and there's a few others that you'd have to do some research and read some stories. That's great. But most of the time, the big studios, there's a lot of people. You got your cubicle and you got your job, and you're probably going to end up doing that for decades. If that's okay with you, the whole, what do you call it, job security thing, okay, but it's a tough life, what it is. And all of a sudden, the glare and the glamour of working at Activision or Blizzard or Microsoft, whatever they're called now, on the next Diablo 4 title, and you've been doing it for 3 years, and you haven't left your cubicle in 3 years, it's not so glamorous anymore. You realize, this is just another job, and it's a hard job. Yeah. There it is.
Unbelievable perspective.
Sorry, I don't want to be a bummer.
Of it all. But I think it's important for individuals to understand as they're looking to get into the field and not be shocked.
Right.
My final question here is for you. What's your next chapter? What are you planning to do?
Yeah, I think I might be getting the teaching bug again. I'm going to put the word out very soon that I'm officially retiring full-time work. And I'm writing a little article about how I got to the industry as well. And in my article, I'm going to ask my friends and colleagues who I've known for years to do the same and put their story of how their get-in story. And I'm hoping that gets enough traction. I can maybe get some more consulting work as a level design consultant. And I don't know, I'm hoping that Lawrence will bring me back for a few more talks. I had a really great time there. I'm hoping to teach a little bit, not full-time, full-time teaching. I don't know. I don't know what's involved in teaching full-time. I'm hoping it's not crazy like Activision or EA was, but I'm going to look into it. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I enjoy working with younger people. My last few years were really just more years about mentoring anyway. So at my level and at my age, it's really at the positions that I was in at my studios, I was a hiring director as well as a design director. So it was all mentorship anyway, right? I enjoyed that process, and I enjoyed helping foster young careers, especially designers, obviously designers. And if I can get them while they're still in school, even better. So I'm looking forward.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time and expertise provided. And this concludes this edition of the Lawrence University Career Center podcast. Thank you again, Michael.
My pleasure.
Great to talk to you. And again, I appreciate the insight that you provide.
Thanks. Thank you so much.